Welcome to the SharePoint Patterns and Practices webcast, and this time we're going to talk about how to migrate your existing JavaScript customizations from in SharePoint Online to the SharePoint Framework extensions. My name is Esa Juvonen. I'm a Senior Program Manager from SharePoint Engineering, and with me today, responsible of the demo staff, is Paolo Pialorsi. So Paolo, will you do the quick intros as well?
Yes, thank you, Vesa, and welcome everybody. I'm Paolo from pc.com, and I'm a senior consultant working in a company of my own. And I'm an MVP on Office Server and Services too.
Yeah, it always makes me smile that you're calling yourself as a senior consultant, even though it's your company. You could call yourself as a president, but anyway, it's your call. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, let's concentrate on today's topic. So we wanted to talk about the fact that what does the migration of a, let's say, a classic, maybe classic JavaScript embedding customization isn't the right term, but JavaScript JS link customization or user custom action customization, how would you transform that to work in a SharePoint framework? And what is the transformation process? And what are the options and all of that? And we're going to walk through these case by case also in a demo, so you'll see the previous scenario and you'll see how it has been transformed. But before we actually go there, let's quickly have a look on what is a SharePoint Framework extension, just to recap this one if you're not familiar with it. So we have kind of three different extension types, or extension components or extension types. Application Customizer is one of these extensions. It gives you a capability of executing code in any page of the site or site collection. Again, slightly depends where are you registering this Application Customizer, so what is the scope of the Application Customizer. And it also gives you're able to embed, for example, let's say Azure Application Insights Analytics to your pages, or you're also able to add widgets, JavaScript UI elements in the top section of the page or in the bottom section of the page. You might call them header and footer. Do internal decisions, we're not calling them actually header and footer, we call them top and bottom placeholders. But you're able to add your custom JavaScript there, and that JavaScript can do whatever. So your classical scenarios could be something like, hey, I want to have a custom navigation, or I want to have a custom footer which has personalized information like in the picture here. You can absolutely make that happen. Now, this could be in the old way of implementing. This was implemented typically using a user custom action collection and embedding a JavaScript, which was then having a dependency on the DOM structure of the page. Application Customizer technically is actually a user custom action, but it takes advantage of slightly more sophisticated implementation, and we'll quickly have a look on those things in the demo section. The second option, let's say extension type, is the command set or list view command set itself. And what this one gives you is an opportunity to add navigation items, menu items in the context menu or in the menu or in the button toolbar of the lists and libraries. So you're able to execute JavaScript code when somebody clicks the menu item or somebody clicks the button in the toolbar. So you might kind of compare this to ACB or custom action menu items in the classic scenarios. And kind of related on that one, we were just chatting this one before we started the recording. So if you had an ACB menu item in the classic implementation, which doesn't contain JavaScript, it actually is immediately available also in the modern experiences, or in the modern experiences. But if your existing ACB or the ribbon button has a JavaScript inside of it, those won't be actually supported as such. So you need to do a transformation to the command set to make the JavaScript execute. And then the final piece is the field customizer. This could be compared with the JS link. So JS link in the field level to override the rendering of the field value. Right now, the field customizer only supports the rendering experience, so it doesn't actually support the editing experience. And that might be something, depending on when you're watching the video, it might be already coming out, or it might be something which is coming out later, because it is in our roadmap when we're recording the video. Anything here what you want to pinpoint, Paolo, on your side? Anything what I'm missing?
I think you were completely clear, so that's okay so far. Thank you.
That's good.
Good job.
At least Paulo is able to follow up on what I'm talking. That's always good. So let's talk about what does it actually mean. So how these things actually work. So how the extension executes on the pages. So when somebody is arriving on a page or a user is navigating to the list or library or a page or a modern page as well. So what's actually going to happen in here is that the server returns an application data, or also the list data or page data. It also returns the SharePoint Framework JavaScript libraries, and it also returns for the client, so as in the browser, manifest for all of the active SharePoint Framework components. So what are extension and web parts which should be rendered as part of this page or HTML page which the user is accessing. And then when that happens, then the browser, in the browser we have an application object, so to say, which is kind of controlling the rendering, orchestrating all of the things which is getting loaded. That's the one which is responsible of checking the manifest of the SPFX component, and then starts loading the manifest, the JavaScript files from the location. Normally this is a CDN. It might be an Office 365 CDN hosted JavaScript or an asset in general, or it might be hosted in somewhere other CDN as well.
And of course, there's a CDN is a suggestion, but it's not mandatory to have a CDN. Of course, it's a good idea to have a CDN for better performances and availability. But
absolutely, it's not a mandatory thing. You can absolutely host your JavaScript files from a root site collection of your tenant. That's a suitable option as well. Now, and then when application has been finished rendering, all of the web parts and extensions are executed. So that's a final step on the page, and what then happens is that those individual components, like the list view command sets, in this case you can see that dark markers in a toolbar and in a list menu are available for your end users to select, or it might be the header or header section or the top section of a page, which is fully customized, and that's where the application customizers could be remaining. It could be actually in a footer as well. Or it could be the field customizer, which is responsible of rendering the field value. So in this case, there's a field customizer, which is rendering the map value of the location. So quite simple scenario in the end, and quite simple how it actually works. But obviously what's interesting is that how do we now transform, if you have existing user custom action-based customizations or JS Link customizations or ACB menu customization, what's the end user experience? First of all, when you're flipping between the classic and modern, and also how can those be migrated to the modern experience? So let's do a live demo on this one. We won't be deep diving on the exact technical steps and details and everything else, but we do have a tutorial articles available on all of the samples which we will show. So let's have a look on the classic implementation and also the modern implementation, and Paulo is going to show that one in practice. So take it away. So let's jump on the demo.
Okay, thank you, Vesa. So here we are in a classic theme site in SharePoint Online, and this classic theme site has been extended using some of the SharePoint feature framework capabilities. Like, for example, here you can see a user custom action through which I extended the pages of this site in order to have a custom footer in every single page, which will just provide few useful links to the end users of my site collection. This solution has been built using a user custom action. We can have exactly the same result from an end user experience perspective if we switch to the modern experience in this site. So for example, if I go to see a modern library in this site, you will see that now I have the modern experience, but still in the lower area of my screen, I have a footer bar here with almost the same links and useful items, of course with the new branding, which is based on the Office UI fabric, so it is nicer, responsive, and cooler, but still with the same functionalities from an end user perspective.
That's actually, Paulo, before you go forward, and that's a really good point as well, because when you're doing this transformation from a classic experiences and this, in this case, JS Link, script source reference in user custom action to the application customizer, it's a great chance to revisit the design and also to revisit the UI design and the requirement of this customization. So obviously, customizations are not bad. Typically, there's a business requirement and functional requirement why the customization is there. But this is a great opportunity to revisit why does it exist, and can we actually make it nicer, better, more flexible for the end users as well. Like in this case, it looks much nicer in the context of the site. Because yes, that's rendered in all of the modern experiences within the site. So the same footer is consistent. So that's cool.
Exactly. And we also have consistency with the full Office 365 offering, because
Correct.
Using Office UI Fabric, we give the same experience wherever the users are browsing the content. So
yes,
that's really cool.
Even though, to be honest, Paolo, your original, let's say, classic user custom action, that's kind of semi-intentionally looking horrible.
I'm a developer, I'm not a designer, you know.
Yeah.
That's the proof. So let's start having a look at the first user custom action from a SharePoint feature framework perspective. So whenever you want to create such an extension using the feature framework, you have to create a feature element file with a bunch of custom actions. Like, for example, here I'm using the jQuery CDN content, which will be included with a script link custom action in every single page, every single classic page of my site, as well as I have a custom action which will still use the script link approach and location to embed one custom JavaScript file in every single classic page to have my footer rendered. I don't know if we want to dig into the details of the JavaScript file by itself or not, but basically I just play with the document object model of the page to embed the custom footer in the document object model.
And that's actually a good point as well. So pinpointing a few things here. So that's a script source link, which is pointing to the JavaScript file. So at this point, you're using JavaScript, which is the SPO custom UI. It needs to know where it's actually getting injected the functionality. And in SharePoint Framework, we actually give you the placeholder. So you can actually say for SharePoint Framework that, hey, I want to put something on the button area of the page. So give me the host where I'm actually able to put that. And the problem with the classic implementation with the user custom action is that whenever we in SharePoint Engineering, we evolve the UI, your DOM structure pointers will break. And that could, in a worst case scenario, nothing will be rendered for end users. And that's not an optimal situation. But SharePoint Framework, we guarantee the references will work.
Exactly. In fact, if we switch to the SharePoint framework extension solution, here we still have, and here we are in a SharePoint framework solution, here we still have a feature element file and custom action. But right now, we are just placing a custom component based on a specific ID, which will uniquely identify our component, which will be the custom application customizer, into a specific location, which is the one for all of the application customizer. This ID is declared in the manifest, JSON manifest file of our extension. And here we simply declare few information, including, of course, the fundamental ID of the customizer. And in the TypeScript file, in which we have the real implementation of the customizer, we have a TypeScript class, which will inherit from a base type provided by the basic infrastructure of SharePoint Framework, and we simply look through a placeholder provider, we simply look for the bottom placeholder of the page so that we can embed our custom footer, which will be a React component, but could be any JavaScript element that you like, inside the placeholder within the page. So even if Microsoft will slightly change the layout of the modern pages, we will still have the bottom placeholder and our content will be still there. So we will not have any troubles in the rendering of our custom footer or custom elements in the page.
Absolutely. And maybe one more additional thing to pinpoint on this one, which we don't need to repeat on the other extensions, is that the client-side component ID in the user custom action, it looks like the same, like how we associated that JavaScript in the old implementation. But there's a clear big difference around the governance of that one. To be able to use the SharePoint Framework extensions, and that extension has to be deployed in the app catalog. catalog. And this is something what all of our customers have been asking. We want to have more centralized control. If that an issue, if it's not it's dependent on who has access on the app catalog, and the app catalog people can then control what's available and what can be associated to the site. So that's a really one additional, let's say, difference between the classic customizations and the modern customization. So there is the governance control if preferred to do so.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now let me go back to my team site and let me show you another example. So now let me switch to the classic experience, even when I'm browsing through the documents or the items in lists. And here we have a list with the classic UI in which I customize the rendering of a field, of a color field. It's just an easy example. So let me show you in this page how the customization works. So let me edit this page and let me show you that in the settings of this list view part under the miscellaneous area, here we have a JS link attribute through which we define that we want to use a custom JavaScript file whenever we will render this list view. And of course, inside the JavaScript file, we will have a bunch of code which will simply provide a custom rendering for the color field with a colored box with the same color that we are using for the field value of the current item. What I mean is that, of course, if I edit this list, every single item will have a color, and I can play with this nice UI and see the exactly the same color that I selected in the field property of my item. So this behavior can be nice. Of course, you can create whatever custom field you like using the JS link approach. But again, and one more time, it uses a JavaScript file somehow embedded in the page without governors and control from the admins. And moreover, if I switch back to the modern experience, of course, I need to refresh the page, but if I switch back to the modern experience from this UI, I will completely lose this custom behavior of rendering my field, because in the modern UI, I cannot use the JS link approach anymore. So,
and on that one, maybe somebody might be, but why can't you? And the answer is, the whole rendering logic is so different with the modern UIs and more optimized and responsive and many other things that the classic JS link way of doing stuff, it just isn't supported, and it will never be supported in here.
Exactly. And on the other side, don't panic, because we have another solution. Yes. We have the field customizers. So let me show you yet another list, which now has been customized from a rendering perspective using the SharePoint framework extensions and precisely a SharePoint framework field customizer. Right now, I have exactly the same behavior as before, but now within a modern list rendered in the modern UI of SharePoint. So exactly same behavior as before. Right now, we do have this custom rendering in the list view only. So we still don't have the capability to have a custom rendering in the edit or in the add new forms. But as Vesa said a few minutes ago, it will come. It's on its way, let me say. And from a development perspective, one more time, you saw how you can use the JS link in the classic mode. Let me show you how you can use the field customizers in the SharePoint framework approach. So let me go here, and here we are in another SharePoint framework solution in which we have a field customizer, which still has a manifest JSON file with a unique ID, still has a feature element from the SharePoint feature framework, but now the feature element will declare a custom field which will have a client-side component ID declared for the custom rendering of this field. And the custom rendering will be realized, will be implemented inside a type, a class in TypeScript in our SharePoint framework solution. And this class will inherit from a base field customizer type. And in the onRenderCell method overriding, we'll simply define what will be the behavior of our custom field. And what is really powerful here is that here we can use fully typed code using TypeScript with the benefit of the fully typed approach of TypeScript. So we can access the entire model of rendering of our field just using an object-oriented approach, and we can go through all of the elements that render our item. We can apply custom styles to them with fully typed approach here as well. Oops, sorry. So we have in full intelligence in the code editor, for example, even if here I'm referencing styles that are in the SCSS file of my solution. So here I have a style file, which I can define using the well-known SCSS syntax, but in the code, I will have a fully typed approach to reference those styles. So from a coding perspective, it's a better experience because I'm fully supported by the environment. Still,
absolutely. And on that one, if you compare this to the, let's say, client-side rendering JavaScript, that wasn't really that well, never ever documented, which is on Microsoft, I get that, but also the implementation style was pretty hectic or horrible. So yeah, much more cleaner way on this way. So.
And let me show you one last example. The last example will be the ACB menu items. Most of you most likely created in their solutions custom extension for ACB menu and for the ribbon bar in the classic experience. So let me go back one more time to the classic experience, and let me go to the document library of the shared document in this site. Here I have a few sample documents, and I can click on the ACB button, and I can just activate any of the custom actions that I can have in the ACB menu. Like, for example, this one, which is just for the sake of making an example, an ACB item, which will open a custom page, which in reality does not exist in this scenario. But as you will see, it will have in the query string the ID and the list ID of my item. Of course, you could have a custom page there doing something around the item which has been selected by the user. So now this solution is an ACB customization, which, as long as it does not use any JavaScript code, can be migrated, or better, can be still used in the modern lists and libraries. But if this ACB menu would have any custom JavaScript code inside of it, of course, because of the JavaScript embedding, it wouldn't be available in the modern experience, in the modern UI of lists and libraries. So what is the replacement for this solution from a SharePoint framework perspective? Back to the modern UI. Here we still have the ACB menu with new UI. And as you can see, we still have the classic one because we just use the URL action in that one, and so we don't have any JavaScript code. But we also have a new one which has been inserted in this ACB menu because we have a custom list view command set provided by the SharePoint framework and by a SharePoint framework extension. So again, and one more time, we can have the same behavior as before, so a custom page which does not exist in reality with the ID of the item and the ID of the list. But we can even do more, because in the SharePoint framework extensions, we can use TypeScript and JavaScript, we can use the Office UI Fabric, and we can create nice UI elements. So let me show you one more example, and then I will go back to the real implementation of that extension. So here we are in another site, which is a modern site in which I have a document library. And if I select a document in this document library, I have this Discuss Now button, which I can click. This one is a command set built using the SharePoint framework extensions. As you can see now, I have a nice dialog window, which is built using the dialog framework of SharePoint framework, as well as the Office UI Fabric components. I can select field values using a very nice and friendly UI, and I can interact not only with SharePoint Online by itself, but to be fair, in this example, I'm going to create a meeting, an event in a calendar, which is in an Office 365 group. So because I'm in SharePoint framework and because I'm in the modern development experience, I can benefit of the full Microsoft Graph offering, and I can interact with the full ecosystem of services services provided by Office 365, even if I'm in the modern experience, or let me say, thanks because I am in the modern experience. Exactly.
Even I'm. Of course, you're in modern experiences. Come on, Paul.
Yeah. Okay. So let me switch back to the previous demo. Let me show you, or let me compare what was the old classic mode of creating an ACB menu, which was based on a custom action and using the SharePoint feature framework. And here again, we have a custom action, we have a registration type and a registration ID, and we have a URL action, which will be the behavior that we will apply to our custom action. Yeah. On the contrary, if we want to create a command set, it will be again and one more time a TypeScript file in which we will have a class inheriting by the base list view command set type provided by the SharePoint framework basic infrastructure. And in the onExecute method, we will get a event argument, which will simply allow us to identify what is the event, what is the command that we are going to execute. And this will be based on a list of commands of items that we can declare in the manifest of our command set. So for example, here I have an item called show details with a specific title and which will be of type command, which is the one we have right now. And so whenever there will be the execution of an event which will be of type show details, here I can just get some information using the selected rows array of rows which I have in the event to get, for example, the ID of the currently selected item or the list ID or whatever else I need to implement my custom business logic. So really powerful, much more powerful than just a bunch of JavaScript embedded in the user custom action that we had in the classic mode, and with the full set of capabilities like the SharePoint framework, dialog framework, and the Office UI fabric to create a nice UI.
And I would say that for all of these things, it's not just the power, but it's also the reliability and the stable implementation. So the SharePoint framework isn't dependent on a DOM structure modifications or those things. It's much more reliable platform, and that's what we want to also. That is one of the key design objectives of SharePoint framework: increase the stability, provide a capability of enabling, still extending SharePoint Online, but in a more reliable way. And that's been a design decision from day one. Now, for all of these things, I think we have some documentation and tutorials also available.
Exactly, precisely. And in fact, that's what I'm going to show you now. On the docs.microsoft.com website, under the SharePoint framework section in the extensions concept migrating existing customizations, you will find 3 different tutorials through which you can go through all of the steps needed to migrate a classic development solution like ACB Menu, User Custom Action, JS Link, using the new approach, the new modern approach through the SharePoint framework extensions. So feel free to use those tutorials as reference, and you will be able to recreate all of the samples that I just showed you.
Excellent. We'll add those all of the in the video notes or the webcast notes, absolutely, so people can easily find them. But I think that's it for this demo. So let's flip back on the slides and summarize the webcast and call it a day. Thank you, Paolo.
Yep.
Good. So good walkthrough. Good walkthrough of things. And what's actually really cool, like Paolo showed on the demo as well, it's really important to realize that it doesn't matter are you using a classic theme site or are you using a group site. If you fall between the modern experiences and classic experiences, you are at the same time flipping between SharePoint framework extensions being supported or the classic customizations being supported. So if you have a scenario where you need to support both, let's say, experiences, it might be that you need to implement then a classic user custom action or a JS link, and then also SharePoint framework extension setup. And this is something to take into consideration when the solutions are being designed. Anything else what we want to pinpoint, Paolo? on top of your great demo.
That's why, based on what you just said, that's why we often say that the modern development and the SharePoint framework are not a replacement for the classic model. They can work together depending on your context. So that's the only addendum I want to add, and want to say thank you for watching this video.
Absolutely. So thank you, Paolo, for a great demo, and thank you everybody for watching the video. And please keep on the feedback coming. If there's something missing on the SharePoint Framework extension side or SharePoint Framework, please let us know using the GitHub and user voice channels. But thank you for watching, and we'll come up with a new webcast sooner or later. Thank you.